watching Twin Tier Sunday with Jennifer Sheahen.
Welcome to Twin Tier Sunday. This week we're learning all about ginseng. And for those of you who don't know exactly what it is or how important it is today, these three guys are going to teach you something miraculous because, believe it or not, it is a very, very expensive crop here, not only in the Northeast, but also throughout Asia as well. So this is Bob. Bob, tell me, what is ginseng?
Okay, well, ginseng is a common name for about 6 species of plants that grow both in North America as well as in Asia. Today we're focusing on American ginseng, which is botanically it's known as Panax quinquefolius, and it is considered to be one of the most important components of Chinese traditional medicine. Panax ginseng, which is Asian ginseng, has been part of their medicine for probably about 4,000 years that we can document. But it's actually pretty scarce and rare in the wild. American ginseng, on the other hand, is still harvested wild, and we're actually going to harvest some wild ginseng today because it is ginseng season, and very, very valuable. Average prices the last few years have been in the neighborhood for New York ginseng, which is the best quality, has been in the neighborhood of between $600 and $1,000 a pound or more for New York ginseng. So it's a pretty valuable commodity, and it's also something that we can grow. So today we're also going to see some wild simulated ginseng, which is ginseng that we're growing in the woods that looks like wild ginseng. And from a conservation standpoint, it tends to protect the wild plant if you can grow something. So conservation through cultivation is kind of my mantra.
There you go. And tell me a little bit about when you go to China to sell this, what does it do to the body and why is it so sought after?
Ginseng is considered an adaptogen, which means it helps your body adapt to stress. It doesn't really cure anything. There's no specific ailment or illness that it would be recommended for, but particularly as people get older, ginseng is something that's prescribed to keep your body functioning properly. So if you have high blood pressure, it might lower your blood pressure. If you're lethargic and you have low blood pressure, it might tend to raise your blood pressure, which is confounding to Western medicine. But an adaptogen is generally what would be considered just allows your body to deal with stress in particular. And that's why it's so popular, because it doesn't cure any one specific thing.
That's crazy. And as far as you guys go, you are from this area. Do you see a lot of people knowing what ginseng is, understanding what ginseng is, like just in your community?
No, it's rare. You don't run into a lot of people that know it. You run into a number of people that heard about it or want to know more about it. And I think the book will be very helpful for them.
That's wonderful. And then why did the two of you get involved with growing ginseng yourself and or going out and finding wild ginseng as well? Either of you. Go ahead. You're the newer one here.
Well, my friend Woody is an avid outdoorsman, and I've learned an awful lot about the outdoors from him. But not just ginseng, but other golden seal and other things you can find in the woods. But for me, it's just still a learning process. Then when we do talk about ginseng with people, it doesn't take long for someone to become quite fascinated with ginseng once you learn about it. And as Bob was saying about the adaptogen, and there are a lot of folklore and wives' tales and urban legends that surround ginseng too that make it even more fascinating. Sometimes it's hard to separate the fact from the fiction.
Yeah, definitely. We were also talking about, I had mentioned a little bit earlier that a lot of where I see it is when you go and get your energy drink and it says ginseng on there. If you've ever bought an energy drink, guess what? It's probably in there. But Bob, you were explaining that's not what you think it is.
Right. When you buy an energy drink or something that's got ginseng extract in it, it's Asian ginseng, which is mass-produced in China and Korea, and it's a very different product than American ginseng. Asian ginseng is considered to be very stimulating, very yang, very hot, whereas American ginseng is more calming or soothing in yin. And the price of Asian ginseng is much, much less than American ginseng. Asian ginseng can be cultivated for about $15 a pound. And so when you're buying these energy products, you're getting an extract of Asian ginseng for the most part. American ginseng is far too expensive to be incorporated into products. So you don't see a lot of value-added products with American ginseng in it just because it's too expensive.
Definitely. And we're going out in a few minutes to an undisclosed location. And that is because it is a very sought-after poached product at some times when you're on state land, or like you were saying, theft if you go onto somebody's private property and decide to take that ginseng. Why is that?
Well, because it's so valuable. And you've got these television shows which have become popular, which sort of glorify this outlaw culture, particularly in Appalachia, of how, you know, Jed went to a wedding, so let's go steal his ginseng, and everybody's got their patches of ginseng. Should point out that in Appalachia, ginseng is far more commonly found than it is here in New York. We're kind of at the northern fringe of its range. So it's really quite uncommon, and that's why people who do have it growing on their property don't really want that fact well known, so it's not advertised. Whereas down south, you could find it in West Virginia, Kentucky, southeastern Ohio. It's really quite common. So there's always people that are poaching it. Again, they're poaching it if it's wild ginseng, they're stealing it if it's cultivated ginseng. There is a distinction there that I think we really need, because you hear about poaching, people say, oh, what's the big deal? You know, someone's just taking this wild plant. But if you've invested a lot of time and a lot of money into growing ginseng, and then it's not poaching, then it's theft. That's like somebody coming in your backyard and stealing your crops or something like that. So it's actually a very serious issue. I would be hard-pressed to name any growers that I know of that have not been robbed at some point.
It's crazy because it does take so long to get it just right. It takes years and years. Some of these roots that you guys have behind us, you said were like 50, 60 years old. I mean, it takes a long time to make it perfect. One last thing I want to touch on is exporting, because obviously the major market is the Chinese that are buying this. So how is it that you get the product here from New York all the way to China?
Oh, there is a paper trail. It is probably the most difficult thing I can think of to try to sell overseas. Ginseng is protected by an international treaty called CITES. And in order for ginseng to be legally exported, even from New York State, there is a paper trail. The roots have to be registered with the DEC. They have to be counted, a certain amount of weight. It has to have an export certificate. Then it has to go through customs. Then it has to go to 4 different ports only in America where it can be exported. So the paper trail to get ginseng, even cultivated ginseng, out of the country is just flat out ridiculous. And that's part of the problem with marketing it too. If you could just sell it, in other words, if I could take New York root to New Jersey and just sell it, you know, that would be one thing. But I actually, even if it was one root, I would have to have an export piece of paper for that. So it's really, you know, the regulations are designed to protect wild ginseng, but it really is a nightmare of paper to try to get it out of the country. 90% of it's going to China anyway, and there's 4 places to get it out of the country. It's really very complicated.
All right. So you just learned a little bit about ginseng itself, how it affects your body, how pricey it can be, where you can find it here in New York, and then also how difficult it is to export. So coming up, we're actually going to take a look at a few different types of ginseng, and then we're going to head out into the woods and see if we can find some for ourselves. Welcome back. So now we're going to learn about some of the different types that you can find here across different areas, actually, because you have quite a different variety. So Bob, tell me, I know you were going to kind of go down the line and do different things here and show me different roots and things that may have happened during its life, because actually looking at the root, you can see, you know, if a mouse had ate it or if there was a worm or how old it is, and you're going to learn some interesting things today.
Right. Well, we'll start out here with a wild simulated ginseng root. This is something that Woody grew at his property. It's about probably 4 years old, and it's already got some size to it, but it doesn't really have much character. And we just talk a little bit about the anatomy of the root, because that's quite important. On the top here is the apical bud. This bud on the top here actually contains the entire ginseng plant that's going to come up next year. So when this plant goes dormant in the fall, the stalk breaks off and it lays underground. And it doesn't grow like a carrot, by the way, it grows sideways in the ground. And next year, this plant will produce a top. So this is about a 3 or a 4-year-old root, possibly 5, because sometimes the roots, the scars get swallowed. And this is worth maybe $2 as a transplant root, but it really doesn't have any value in terms of medicinal value. It really doesn't get valuable as a medicine until it's 5 or 6 years old. And we've got a few more cultivated roots here. Notice how smooth they are. A little bit of wrinkling here, which is a good sign, because in time, this wrinkling is going to really add value to the root. But again, we're looking at a 3 or a 4-year-old root here. Not worth much. If I were to buy these, I might pay $2 a root as a transplant. If I were buying these by the pound, I don't think I'd pay $100 a pound for it. It's not really worth that much.
And is that something that people, when they start cultivating, or if they start cultivating, that they can expect this early on?
Yes, and most people will grow it from seed, but a lot of people don't want to wait from seed, so they'll actually buy transplant roots like this, and they'll plant that along with the seed, so they actually get to see the ginseng growing as it comes up every year. It takes a long time to get a really commercially valuable root. Technically, you can't even export it unless it's 5 years old. And the way you determine that is by counting the scars on the rhizome. And this one, I can only really see one distinct scar where last year's top came off. But if we take a root such as this, here's the stalk from last year, right there. Now when that comes off, and it's going to break off, it leaves a scar. There's the bud with next year's plant in it. And if you look at these ridges, you can clearly see the scar. That was the year before, that was the year before, that was the year before, year before, year before. So this root here is probably 10 or 12 years old. Now all of a sudden we're getting into some value. You can see that there's a little bit more of that wrinkling on the root itself, this concentric wrinkling. It's forked, it's branched, which is a good trait, something that would be desirable as opposed to a carrot. So that root, now we're getting into the $200 a pound fresh price range, so $600 a pound dried roughly, because it dries down roughly 3 to 1. And then if you get into the really valuable root, those would be big and they would be old, like this for example. This root, again with that beautiful wrinkling down here, the bud for next year, but look at all the scars on the rhizome. This root in my hand is probably 30 to 40 years old. I have one particular buyer that I sell to who will pay me for this root about $1,200 a pound fresh weight. So this is going to retail at about $3,000 a pound. And I say retail, but actually that's to a dealer. If you were to go to New York City and go into Chinatown and try to buy a root of this quality, you would pay $12,000 a pound or more. Or a root that's this particular shape, that's been this well dug, that it's got all this fiber root with it, that all adds value to it. This is a type of a root that might be displayed and sold individually in a beautiful red velvet box for $5,000. One root.
That is absolutely wild. So you've learned a little bit about what it looks like when it's cultivated, what it looks like when it's wild and very, very expensive. We are now going to go out into the forest and try and find some on our own as well, because Bob has strategically planted seeds years and years and years ago. So today we're going to go and try and find his old seeds. All right, we'll see you in just a few moments.
Notice we blindfolded our reporter here. We are in a secret location. She's not allowed to know, so we put this blindfold on her just for security purposes. Plus I get to hold her hand, so this is great.
Don't worry, the blindfold was just a joke. But as we made our way into the forest, a landmine of ginseng appeared.
Okay, we've made it down into the forest and we're actually looking at a ginseng plant right here. Oddly enough, I spotted it pretty much right away because of the distinct red berries. So Bob, tell me about this plant here, and I guess explain everything to me.
Well, this is actually an area that we planted about 25 years ago, and the ginseng is naturalized here, which means it is now a self-sustaining, self-reproducing population of ginseng. So this plant that we're going to dig up the root in a little while, because we are on private property and I do have permission of the landowner, which is a regulation in New York State. In order to dig wild ginseng, you have to have permission of the landowner, which I have. But this has got berries on it, which means it's a reproductive plant. Each of these leaves, these are compound leaves, they're called prongs. So this would be a 3-prong plant, and it's got 2 berries on it. And typically the berries will have 1 or 2 seeds in them, more commonly 2 seeds. And they don't taste bad, so I was going to ask Jennifer if she'd like to eat the berry. And then I'll have her save the seed, and then we're going to plant the seed nearby, because the idea is to get reproduction. Here's a little seedling that came off of this plant last year. But the seeds that are in this berry won't come up next year. It'll take another year before they come up. So ginseng's got about an 18-month dormancy period for the seed. So even though she's going to eat the berry and we're going to plant the seeds, we won't get a seedling next year, but the year after that. So here you go.
Okay, all right, sounds good. So here we go. This is berry time. It's very, well, this one is pretty soft. I don't know if that changes. Just squirt it all over.
Tastes a little bit soapy.
It does taste like soap. I don't recommend just eating the berries. Woo!
They make terrible wine too. Really a bitter wine. Right.
But there is the 2 seeds.
2 seeds. Okay, now if you put the seeds in my hand,
There
I'll
you
show you
go.
how to plant them. You really don't want to plant the seeds too deep. The seed should only be planted about a 1/2 inch deep. So I'm just going to scrape away a little bit of the leaf litter here. And I'm going to just make a little, maybe a 1/2 inch deep hole with my finger. And I'm going to plant 1 seed there. And I'm going to, you don't want the plants to be touching each other when they grow. So I'm going to go about 10, 12 inches away. And I'm going to plant the other seed there. Again, no deeper than a 1/2 inch. Cover it up with some leaf litter. And if all goes well, 2 years from now, we'll have a little seedling plant just like that, which is a natural seedling that came off of this mother plant here. So we've got 1 more berry for you to eat.
All right, 1 more berry.
It's not going to taste any better than the first one, but
They grow on you.
Doesn't. I don't know.
taste any
I don't know
better.
about this growing on me. I don't think so. Different.
Yeah.
Whew.
But now comes the real tricky part. We're actually going to dig up this root. I have no
let's
idea
do
how old this root is. It could be, it's got 3 prongs and it's making berries, so I'm going to guess it's at least 5 or 6 years old. It could be older than that. It could be 10, 15 years old. We don't know. As I said, this was planted 20 years ago. I doubt if this is one of the original plantings, but it could be. So we're going to use my fingers very carefully to try to expose the top of the root. And situations like this, we will use a tool. And the tool of choice is a screwdriver. But you don't want to damage the root in any way. So, and
Pick away slowly.
it's amazing how your fingers can distinguish between tree roots and ginseng roots.
Whoa.
And you do that to a ginseng root, you've ruined it. And they don't grow straight down like a carrot, so I'm feeling around with my thumb to where I can actually feel the root starting to branch off, which I am feeling right now. And I'm teasing it with my thumb. I can see the apical bud, which is where next year's plant's going to come from. And
It's like doing surgery on the ground over here, I'm telling you. And what I learned, I actually watched a documentary earlier this weekend with Bob in it, and it was saying how you really want from the very top all the way to the bottom of the root, correct?
you want to get the fiber out, which I got most of the fiber out too. It's not a particularly old root. It had another root growing here which rotted off and died. So this particular root that's died was about 12 years old. It has now grown a new root which is about 5 or 6 years old, and it's going to fork and branch, and it's got a little bud on there, which is where next year's plant will come out of. Now, a root that this small has absolutely no commercial value. This is not worth digging, and I try to encourage people that dig ginseng, if they dig up a root like this is what you do with it. You put it back in the hole. And in 5 or 6 or 7 or 10 years, that root will have grown some character, it'll grow some weight. So don't dig little tiny roots like that and expect to sell them. That root on a weight basis is worth 10 cents, 25 cents for the weight. It's really not worth anything. 5 years from now, it could be worth $5. So when you get a little root like that, you put it back in the ground. The other thing you might want to do is, since it is ginseng season and somebody may come out here and they might decide they're going to steal this ginseng. So what I would do in a situation like that is break off the top very close to the ground. That way there's no evidence that there was a ginseng root here. On my commercial ginseng plantings that I have home, we cut all the tops off the first week of September because we don't want poachers to come in. And actually, the best tasting part of ginseng is this white portion.
I hope it's better than
Well,
berry.
you made a face at the berry, but I want you to taste that and see if we had the same
Okay.
reaction. Just the white portion there.
Let's see
Take a
here.
bite of that.
Pull up this around here. All right. Mm-hmm.
Now, isn't
It's
that
very
sweeter?
good.
It's like a Timothy stem or something like that you pick. Yeah.
It's
now that-
very good. Almost like you said, celery. Very similar to that as well. coming up in just a few moments, you're also going to be learning about how you can get involved with cultivating on your own land, because there is a program that is geared just for you. So I hope you learned a lot about ginseng. And now, before we go to the final last portion of the show, we're going to find out how you can now cultivate it, because there's an organization here in the Twin Tiers that can help you, assist you, and get you on your feet with ginseng in your own land. So go ahead. Who wants to start with about the organization?
Well, essentially, Finger Lakes Ginseng will come to your plot or your property and do a site evaluation and survey the area and determine if, first of all, if ginseng would be able to be cultivated in that area, and if not, we would help you to achieve those goals necessary to grow it successfully in your woods, whether that be to fortify the soil, help you decide how to trim your woods for the proper lighting. We check the pH and do soil samples, and of course and follow your progress. That's all.
Definitely. And then how much does it cost for somebody to get involved with the organization, to have you guys assist them?
Well, generally, we generally charge $500 for a site survey and evaluation, and that includes a informational book. It's a handbook, a grower's handbook, and it contains a wealth of very valuable information, all Bob Bifus's materials. A lot of his materials are put into one handy book, and there's plot log sheets in there, and we teach you how to log your plots and document them, and of course we stick with you throughout the growing season too.
And then how long did you guys have this organization set up for, and then how has the success been so far?
Well, the documentation of Bob Bifus here has just started this year.
Wow.
And up until now, it's just been friends helping friends. And now we're expanding into anybody that is interested.
That's wonderful.
We need more growers.
And then as far as people who decide to take on this is something that you may not see results now or, in a few years, but it will take maybe, 5-7 years before you start
5 to 7, you're going to have a good showing. And like 7 to 10 years, then you're in the money. And if you can wait that long and you can take care of it like you should, if you take care of it, it'll take care of you.
That's wonderful. And like you were telling me a story earlier about being able to buy all your Christmas presents every year. With that, it was a very touching story, and you said it really is something that can bring a good economy to our area in the future.
Yes, I agree.
My company is sort of the parent company of all this, is because I work with these growers. We provide seed at cost. My company, which is called American Ginseng Farm, spelled with a P, we buy 300 or 400 pounds of seed every year. And so we make it available at cost to Woody and his company, and then he in turn can sell it to his people at a much, much lower price than they would pay, say, on the internet for the seed. You could pay $20, $30 an ounce on the internet. And again, my company, buying it in bulk, we can make it available. My company is interested in buying the ginseng that these people are going to be growing. And it's interesting because most people like to grow things, but they don't think much about marketing it. Well, we kind of have a guarantee that if you grow it, we'll buy it. Because we're interested in the final product as much as getting people started. This is not the type of deal where we're going to show you how to grow ginseng and then forget about it. We'll hold your hand for as long as it takes. And eventually these independent growers out here will be selling their roots. I guarantee, I promise, we will buy all the ginseng you can grow at a fair market price. Probably a better price than you'll get from your local dealers, because we have more connections. We're a big company right now.
All right. Yeah. So one last thing before we go. Bob, I want you to tell me, what is the one thing that draws you to ginseng? When you wake up in the morning, or years ago, what was the one thing that sparked you to say, you know what, this is going to be a big part of my life?
I'm haunted by ginseng. I sleep about it. I dream about it. Ginseng's changed my life. It definitely turned my life around, back through some stressful times. And the older I get, the more I get to appreciate it. I had learned as a young person that ginseng is something that's for old people. Well, I'm an old person now, and it really is true that the older you get, the more valuable it becomes. Again, it's an adaptogen. It's something that makes your body work better. You get to be 65 years or older like me, and your body just doesn't work that way. You don't sleep well and all these other things. Ginseng actually works on those things. There's no medical documentation that says that it's going to cure anything. There actually has been some research done in dealing with cancer patients, not for the cancer, but for dealing with the side effects of radiation and chemotherapy. So there is some published data that says ginseng certainly does help people that are undergoing these treatments to feel better. There's been some interesting work with ginseng berry juice. We didn't care for the berries, but the juice from the berries is actually being used to treat type 2 diabetes with pretty good results. So my worst fear is that it will be recognized as a drug and then regulated. I'm very happy that the FDA considers it as worthless, because I think the people that buy ginseng and the people that use ginseng, they know differently, and that's fine with us.
Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of Twin Tier Sunday. I hope you learned a lot. And how can they get in contact with you guys so they can start growing on their own?
www.fingerlakesginseng.com.
Perfect. We'll see you next week. Make sure you tune into Twin Tier Sunday. This week, learn all about the ginseng root
We are in a secret location she's not allowed to know.
and why it is so sought after,
You would pay $5,000, one root.
and how you can grow it yourself.